Okay, you've figured that all out already. Very good. Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you for showing up today to talk about transportation. We're here today, I think, for a number of reasons, all of which are related to our transportation system, and we're here to affirm and reinforce the administration's commitment to a strong and nuanced transportation system here in the city of Lincoln. And more specifically, we're talking about going forward. We want to talk about the future of transportation in our community. We all know that providing safe and efficient ways for people and goods to move about in our community is essential to economic development, essential to education, essential to our overall quality of life. I think there's a chart I wanted you to look at that indicates how much money has been invested in the past few years in roads in the city of Lincoln. And as you can see, as you peruse the chart, we have spent record amounts of money on the roads in recent years. Street funding has increased about 58% since the 2009-2010 fiscal year. With recent budget action, we have also expanded bus services in the community with investments in StarTran that will help many residents, many employers, and businesses across the city. We've also been investing in Greenlight Lincoln to improve traffic safety and flow. We funded the South Beltway, and we want to continue these kinds of investments. Unfortunately, we are aware now of some confusion in the community about the long-range transportation plan. And we want to talk more about that. It's confusion that could have the effect of derailing our transportation goals, and we want to keep moving forward in a unified manner on those goals. So first, let me give you a little background on what the long-range transportation plan is. Essentially and fundamentally, the federal government requires cities to plan for their transportation future. They make that requirement because they provide us with a large amount of funding. And they require a document called the Long Range Transportation Plan. This is essentially the transportation chapter of our comprehensive plan. We put it into our comprehensive plan. It predicts and guides city growth into the future in this particular area. Over the past year, just this last year, hundreds of elected officials, city leaders, and members of the public have been involved in developing the new long-range transportation plan. The Planning Commission recently voted unanimously to recommend approval of that plan. Unfortunately, members of the community are hearing last-minute misinformation in the local media about that plan. In short, some important facts about funding for bus service, for trails and sidewalks have been misrepresented. Facts do matter to us here, and it is extremely important that decision makers and the public together understand the real proportions of the segments, of the elements of this plan, not the distortions. The fact is that the vast majority of funding anticipated in the long-range transportation plan, which totals $1.9 billion. This is over 24 years, and it's from 12 different sources. The vast majority of that funding is dedicated to roads. Some are saying that we should shift even more money to roads at the expense of other forms of transportation that many in our community rely upon. The fact is that major cuts would have to be made in bus service, trails, and sidewalks. Major cuts would have to be made to fund a relatively minor increase in road funding. A little later here, our planning director, David Carey, will give you some of the actual figures on that equation. It's important to understand that we cannot shift the money in the way some are advocating because many funds are legally restricted to specific purposes. For example, federal funds for bus service and trails cannot be legally moved to roads. It's also important to understand that many of the funds are matching funds. We only receive the state or federal dollars if the city provides a local match. When you take all of these factors into consideration, a big shift in local funds would cost Lincoln citizens many millions of dollars in matching federal funds for bus service. This would mean huge cuts in StarTran, and the negative impact would rip our community. We have to remember these important statistics about those who use the buses. Half of StarTran riders have no other means of transportation, half of them. About 43% of riders are from households with annual incomes of less than $20,000 a year. And unfortunately, we have an increasing number of folks facing poverty in these recent years. And finally, nearly 65% of StarTran trips are for work or for school, not unimportant reasons. Imagine how these cuts would affect the daily lives of our low-income families, our seniors, our students, and our friends with disabilities. Imagine the impact on employers who already face worker shortages. This giant step backward would also directly contradict the City Council's very recent decision to invest more funding into improving StarTran service. Let me repeat, shifting funds is a direct contradiction to the City Council's recent investment in StarTran, investment supported by both Republicans and Democrats. Why would we choose now to move backward rather than forward? Earlier this week, Lonely Planet, the largest travel guide book publisher in the world, named Lincoln as one of the top 3 exciting places to visit in the U.S. in 2017. One of the reasons, our extensive, nationally recognized trail system. A radical shift in funds would not only result in deep cuts for our trail system, but it would also reduce funds to repair sidewalks and install handicapped ramps. But with respect to trail funding, since none of the trails funds are eligible for roads, we would essentially sacrifice one of our city's jewels for no increase in road funding. The worst case scenario, failure to pass a comprehensive long-term transportation plan in a timely manner, would jeopardize federal funding for roads themselves and even may cause a delay in the South Beltway project. An adopted LRTP is a prior condition for receiving federal funds for roads, for transit, for trails, or for sidewalks. Curiously, it appears that some of those who are calling for better roads and more investment in roads are also disingenuously calling for cutting the sources of funds that go to roads, like the wheel tax and the property tax. The fact is that you cannot pay less and get more in this area. That is why Planning Director Carey said that we cannot guarantee our roads will improve in the future without adequate funding. That's why we continue to call for a community conversation on road funding. We all share a goal to invest more funds in roads. That's why we work together to increase road spending during my time in office. But the bottom line is this: if our decision makers choose to shift funds as described, it may decimate StarTran. If we do not enact the LRTP, that would jeopardize our federal funding for all transportation, including roads. I want to emphasize that we're not talking about cutting off public discussion. Let's have this dialogue about transportation funding. Let's talk about moving forward and the ways of moving forward, not backward. Dialogue is and will always continue to be an important part of a robust democracy. But to have that dialogue, we need to rely on facts and actual data, not misinformation and half-truths. If we don't, we run the risk of bringing the type of divisiveness that we now see at the national level here to Lincoln. I don't think Lincolnites want that. I think Lincoln is better than that. We appreciate the City Council's unanimous support of increasing StarTran service and funding during the budget process just 3 short months ago. I call on our City Council members to continue their support, ignore the misinformation, and to do the smart thing. We should not give in to political rhetoric. So, with that, at this point, I want to introduce David Carey, our Planning Director, who's going to give you some more specific information and numbers. And then we'll call upon the individuals who are in front of you, which I hope I will identify one at a time. And they have been strong supporters of different aspects of Lincoln's transportation system. And I very much appreciate their being here today. David?
Media members, this chart has just been handed out to you, and it might be a lot easier to see on paper.
Thank you, Mary Bartler. Thank you for the opportunity to talk through the facts that we have proposed in our long-range transportation plan. It's also a good opportunity to emphasize that we are still in the process of discussing this plan, and that we've had about 13 months of process prior to this point, and we believe it's been a very productive way to come up with the updated plan with a lot of very good and accurate information to help us make the best transportation choices moving forward. So if nothing else, we want this plan to be informative and accurate so that we can make those right decisions. And we believe we have created such a plan over the last year. The first chart that I'd like to walk through here, and this is really just to identify some of the basic information points that the mayor alluded to in his statement, is what the potential impact would be on StarTran, the LRTP funding percentage changes that are being discussed to some degree publicly now. The first line that you see is that the 18.6% is the percentage of the transit budget that is proposed overall for the next 24 years out to the year 2040. That is roughly the same percentage in the existing adopted plan. It is also roughly the same percentage of the transportation budget that has just been adopted as part of the 2-year budget for StarTran. So we started with effectively what we've been doing for StarTran and transit service in general. That is a cost of about $452 million over 24 years, putting that into perspective related to over $1.9 billion in road funds in the plan, just to make sure that we have the starting point all the same there. If a decrease in that percentage of investment in transit, just down to 17%, which is the second line in your chart there, That would equate to about 8.3% decrease in the StarTran budget. And what that means is just over $1.5 million annually for the duration of the 24-year plan. What that means, though, is it's a very significant impact on the level of service that StarTran can provide. That decrease, that 8.3% decrease, would end weeknight service, less frequent midday service. It would end Saturday service, and the school booster routes, that service would go away as well. So not an insignificant impact on what transit is able to do with that amount of decrease in a budget. If that were to directly go over into the roads program, that's about a 1.9% increase in the roads program. What that equates to, that $1.56 million per year, is approximately 4 blocks of a 2-lane roadway to be constructed. So not to say that roads are not important, but the impact on transit with a decrease like that, just down to the 17% instead of 18.6%, that is a significant impact on what we can provide the community in our transit program. Anything more than that 1.6% cut, anything lower than the 17% of an investment, starts to threaten the viability of our federal funding. And the reason why that's very important to point out is that we do get a significant amount of funding from both the state and the federal government for our transit program. And those funds cannot be used for other forms of transportation. And once we start to cut even deeper into StarTran's budget, we risk those funds. And so the point there is that we have a very a solid program for transit service. We're reflecting that, and it's also that level of service that we just decided to support in the current 2-year budget. And what we're proposing in the new plan is just to continue that level of service. And it's not necessarily an increase in investment. It is the same investment that we're reflecting in the current budget. The next chart that I'd like to get to really just points out kind of how the trails program would be impacted by any significant cuts. I'd like to start out with the first line there that of the overall transportation investment in the proposed transportation plan, about 1.5% goes towards the trails program, so a much smaller percentage. That's about $36 million over 24 years. That also is reflective of what we're currently investing. That is not an increase. That is maintaining what we have been investing in recent years. And again, comparing that to the $1.9 billion invested in roads over the 24 years at the same time. If we were to decrease that percentage down to 0.5%, that would be a 66% decrease in the investment in trails, or about $1 million annually. That would pretty much halt any new trails being built. We would really have a problem trying to keep up with growth in our community to provide that level of investment for areas for our trail system. And the main point here is that those trail funds are not flexible. They cannot be moved around. They cannot be used for other sources of transportation or other programs for transportation. That funding is really earmarked for trails. So there would be no benefit to the roads program by moving that $1 million away from trails. So I just wanted to be clear on that, and I think the point there is that we're trying to use the facts and be very clear about what this proposed plan has in it. And we feel like it is a smart plan. It is a fiscally responsible plan.
Stephen, thank you very much. Beatty, why don't you step up first, if you would? I think most of you know Beatty Bross is with the Center for People in Need.
Thank you, Mayor. I think some of us, I work at the Center for People in Need, and for you who do not know, we work with low-income people. In fact, we see probably most of the low-income people in Lincoln, Nebraska at one time or another. We provide a multitude of services, food 3 times a week. We have job training, we have education, we work with people who've been in prison, and we talk to them. And many of them are dependent on the bus system to get to work, to get to the center, to get to food, all types of services that they do need. Because many of them have an income that they cannot afford to have a car. Am I talking? Okay. I think most of us forget that 45% of the Lincoln Public School students live in poverty. I mean, that's an alarming figure, 45%. That means half of our population basically live in poverty. The families that we see, 40% of the families that we see live on less than $750 a month. 70% live on less than $1,250 a month. The average family size is 4.4. Many of the families we see are dependent on public transportation. Last night, I went to the food distribution. I talked to a couple people who I said, tell me, why do you use public transportation and why? Mike said, well, his car broke down, and then his bike broke down, and so he had to use a public transportation system. Keen said, it's convenient. It doesn't cost that much, and he has to go to the hospital regularly. A mother and a child come to pick up food from us 3 times a week. They take the bus. How else would they get food? I mean, they'd be hungry. Carolyn said, the only way I can get around is on the bus. She's asthmatic. She has one of those breathing machines. She says, I could not survive without the bus. That's serious, you all. People are dependent on it for their livelihood, but they also depend on it for their health, for their whole total well-being. Public transportation is essential. It's essential to many of our citizens, and especially to people who live in poverty and have no choice but to ride the bus. Thank you.
Katie, thank you. Richard Smelling's been a long-time advocate of transportation needs in the city. Richard, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mayor. About a year and a half ago, my Honda CR-V got multiple hits, and I decided, since I'd always been a believer in public transit, I was going to give it a try. I rode StarTran. I today came to this meeting riding StarTran. It is my almost 99% mode of getting around in Lincoln. So I decided I was going to try to do something to deal with some of the shortcomings I saw in StarTran. So for a year and a half, Citizens for Improved Transit grew. We involved a lot of people. We went to a lot of meetings. And at those meetings, we had the consultants from Nelson Nygaard, a transportation consulting firm. They very carefully crafted a plan for Lincoln that would improve the routes and schedules. There were hearings in front of the StarTran Advisory Board. There were hearings in front of the City Council. And then council delayed so that there could be quadrant meetings. So there was additional input and discussion. And finally, a plan was adopted. During none of these meetings did I hear the person who has been talking about cutting StarTran funding speak against improvements in StarTran or more StarTran funding. He sort of was the snake in the grass, and he was lying there, and he waited until the budget sessions were over, and now he's saying, let's erase all of that. Let's change things. Now, this gentleman supposedly represents medium and small-sized businesses in Lincoln, and I can't see where he's representing his membership very well. If we four-lane a whole bunch of streets in Lincoln, the people that would otherwise stop and patronize these small and medium-sized businesses are going to go zipping right by those businesses on the four-lane streets and patronize the big box places. In any event, the consultants left us with a 5-phase plan for bringing our transit system up to the point where it needs to be. With the additional funding from the City Council this budget year, we have been able to implement phases 1 and part of phase 2. We still have the rest of phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and phase 5 to deal with. I think it would be an absolute tragedy for the city of Lincoln to have come this far forward and then to turn around and reverse things and start going backward. Now, we can talk a lot of theory, but I want to leave you with one personal example that I'm aware of. There was a young man. He got a job in North Lincoln, north of Cornhusker Highway, with an automotive salvage operation. For 30 days, he went to that operation in the daytime and learned how to salvage parts. At the end of the 30 days, his boss came to him and said, "We think you're fully trained now. You're ready to be on your own, and so Monday you start on your own. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have you work the evening shift." And the guy says, "Well, wait a minute, I've got a problem with that because I don't drive and I've been riding StarTran out here, and StarTran doesn't operate late enough in the evening." And the boss said, "Well, I'm sorry, that's the only position that's open. You either take it or you pass." Well, the guy ended up having to decline that employment. That was an $18 an hour job that he booted because he couldn't get transportation to and from work. I think there are a lot of other stories like that too. We're going to hear from somebody to speak about trails later on, and I just want to say that I see the trail system and the bus system as being very symbiotic, because what you can do is you can put your bicycle on the front of a StarTran bus and ride to a distant area where you might not be able to take the young kids and use a trail that you might not otherwise use. So I think it's a great, great interrelationship. And I would be as sad to see the trail funding cut as I would to be the StarTran funding cut. So I think I pretty much said my piece, Mr. Mayor, and I certainly appreciate your continuing support for public transit and its improvement in Lincoln.
Thank you. You said your piece well, as usual. Anne Marie Chakowski works with senior citizens a lot.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm a senior citizen. I'm 72. I don't have a car, but I ride the bus to work. I ride the bus home. Without that bus, I probably couldn't work, because it just wouldn't be practical. I also use the bus to go get groceries, because I live downtown. We don't have a grocery store. I use it to go to doctor's appointments. So without the bus service, I don't know what I would do. I used to live out in Havelock, and I moved to downtown because the bus system was so much better downtown. And I'm just thrilled with it now. It takes me on the bus 8 minutes to get to work. It takes me longer to come home, but it only takes me 8 minutes, and I work with Head Start. So I'm around a lot of little kids, I go to the schools. They don't come home with me. I go to them. And I love doing it. I've done it for 9 years, and I want to keep on doing it. So please, let's leave the bus service. We have the baby boomers. That's a lot of people. That's a lot who I see on the bus when I go to work or when I come home. There's a lot of those baby boomer retirees. So I think we've done a great job so far, and I'd certainly like to see it continue. Thank you.
Anne Marie, thank you. Dr. Liz Standage is with the Lincoln Public Schools.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. One of the most important transportation events that occurs every morning that we have school is 40,000 students make their way to school. And a number of them do that on a StarTran bus. And I think it's very valuable to families that that is an alternative. I happened to work side by side with a mom last summer who beamed. I remember her smile when she was trying to navigate that tough transition to 9th grade. She had a 9th grader starting at Lincoln High, and the question was, how's she going to get home? And she said, there's a bus route. And I think a lot of people have that experience across our city. It's a great partnership. We've talked about the booster routes. That's significant for areas of our city. So we have a number of families that I think had the moment in planning for how to get their child to and from school, and they said, there's a bus route. And that solved challenges related to maintaining work schedules, maintaining family, and I think it's something valuable that we need to consider as a community if we were to scale back on the side of school transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Next is our old friend, Mike DeKalb from the Planning Department, retired, now a very fine community leader. Thank you for that
Thank you.
encore career.
Oh, boy. You should, yeah, retirement is wonderful. Sort of that lead into that goes with my first sentence here, is I've been in this ball game, or playing this game for 40 years plus, as a city planner, city county planner, as a bus rider for 36 plus years, and I still ride it on occasion. And I'm now chair of the StarTran Advisory Board and have the pleasure of leading that group with StarTran itself, trying to make sure our routes work and so on. And in those years, I've seen many adjustments. I've seen way back when the whole thing was about building new roads on the edge of town. That's where all the money went. And then we've shifted since then. We've readjusted where the money goes to some extent, and a major emphasis now is maintaining our existing streets after the older parts of town said, wait, how about us? Potholes and resurfacing and so on, we've done that. And then there was federal legislation, and the city got smarter about all forms of transportation, and we addressed multimodal, all ways of getting around, all ways of getting from here to there, including trails, sidewalks, streets, and transit. We all kind of forget that all of us get off the bus or get out of our car and use the sidewalk. We all become pedestrians at some point or another. So the whole package is the point of it. We just went through a 2+ year, I didn't try to find the exact numbers, but over a 2-year process on StarTran's revising, review, and adjusting. Many hearings, hundreds of items of testimony, letters, and so on. I conducted the StarTran package. We had, I think, 2.5, 3 hours of testimony of people concerned about where the buses went, how the services is, how they're going to get to work, from every aspect of the community you can think of. And that ended with revised and expanding the StarTran system to try and adjust those. So, as was mentioned earlier, I had 2 months, but the proper one is just 3 months ago. The City Council, and I think led by Cindy Lamb, voted to approve the package after, as you said, many hearings, quadrant meetings, and so on to get testimony, and said there's a big need. And I guess my point is, we should not jeopardize other funding sources. The fact that we have to have multimodal, that the feds and the state require certain aspects. Some of these are in different pots. You can't just rob and shift and put over here, like the trail system. These and other impacts on other systems impact jobs, they impact the poor, they impact the handicapped, they impact students, young students, college students, the young who can't drive yet, the aged, and many other aspects. I've seen them all and worked with many of them. So I guess the bottom line point is we need to stick to the plan that we've developed. We need to give it a chance. It's been well thought out. It's got a lot of effort put into it. It's just getting started. Let's not cut things short. And remember, the whole point is we've made a better city out of this package, the whole package. So that's my point.
Thank you, Mike. Good to see you again. Gary Ventrup, I hope I pronounced that right, is with our Pedestrian Bicycle Advisory Committee, and it's spent considerable amount of time with them. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity. I think it's too often some in our community view trails as a recreational element, a luxury. And that overlooks the fact that trails are actually an important piece in a comprehensive transportation plan. Many use trails to commute to their jobs daily, I being one of them. But also importantly, trails are used as routes for children to attend school, to provide a safe route off of streets that they can attend. This actually was recognized in 2014 by the American Planning Association and gave an award to Lincoln for their trail system and called it a great place. And one of the reasons that the American Planning Association gave Lincoln this award was because it demonstrated a perfect example of public-private partnership. Many of the trail funds that are used, that the city receives, are also matched by private dollars. And that is a very important piece, an example of a true functioning private partnership. But I also want to point two other kind of things that I think show that investment in trails contributes to other aspects of our community. Another important one is that it contributes to economic development. You can ask several of the developers that have developed along the new N Street protected bikeway that bikeway was one of the reasons they located their multi-million-dollar project along there. In addition, there was a study back in 2005 out of Omaha from the public health researchers there, and they used Lincoln's data, and they studied and found out that for every dollar invested in Lincoln's trails, it returned a 2.94 direct benefit in medical savings and benefit to health. So clearly, these trails, investing in it has multiple benefits, and it's not just a recreational component. And furthermore, I'd like to echo the comments that trails and bus service are really a synergistic effort, and that really we need to provide those together. And with that, thank you again.
All right, thank you very much. With that, rather than keeping you all standing up here, why don't we allow you to take a seat, and we'll call you back up if one of the reporters would like to speak directly with you. David, I know they'll probably be interested in some of the numbers, so why don't you come up here and help me, Mike? I think most of you know Mike runs our bus transportation system, the StarTran system, and certainly is the most knowledgeable person about that system within our organization. So with that, can we answer any questions you may have?
I just want to make sure I understand the initial, the charts. This is 18.6% of total funding goes to StarTran.
Yes.
Correct.
Is that where the 20% number comes from that was being used in the criticism of this plan?
It's the 18% plus very small percentages for trails and for
Okay.
the third element.
Sidewalks.
Has anybody figured out if in fact you cut back the way that you say, how much actual local dollars would be freed up that you could spend on roads?
Sure.
Yeah, the chart shows that if you cut from 18.6% to 17%, that brings StarTran's, that's a cut of 8.3% to StarTran's overall budget. And that equates then to $1.56 million annually.
Is that local funds?
And that is local funds, yes.
Okay, so there's on top of that, there's federal funds that you lose.
That's correct. And that's where the next line kind of goes. If you cut even further, then you start to cut into that federal funding in a big way.
Okay. The 18.6% includes the whole bunch of funds, federal, state, and local.
That's correct.
And apparently there was some discussion about the officials meeting in which Dave Carey allegedly said that if we used this plan, the district would be worse off than they could have done.
Yeah, Nancy, that was, in the context of that question was, what is the situation in 2040 of our streets? And so the discussion ensued about what do we need to do, what are the needs out there versus what we can afford to do based on the assumptions that we have in the plan as well as the reality of what revenue streams we have for transportation. And so based on the existing, more or less, revenues that we have moving forward, we are meeting the most basic needs, but there are many other needs out there that we would want to get to if possible. And so that was really the context of that question and that discussion.
What are some of the needs out there that we won't be meeting if the revenue stream remains the same?
It runs across all the different modes. As was mentioned earlier about the 5 different phases of that transit development plan that we just approved and have as our plan for transit. Most of phase 2 and the rest of phase 3, 4, and 5 are phases that we can't get to under the current revenue streams. On trails, there are many more trails in our plan as conceptual and future trails that eventually we will get to, but there are some, such as along the South Beltway, that would be nice to be able to build in the next 24 years, but we simply can't get to some of those because there's not enough funding. On the road side, there's a plethora of different things that we would want to get to if possible. We would love to put more money towards things like rehabilitation. The East Beltway, high priority. That is a very large project, but we cannot get to that project. We would not get to that project on the current revenue streams because it would really hurt the other efforts that we would do during that time frame. So those are just some examples, but there are a lot of needs that are explained in the transportation plan as proposed that get to that point, that there are many more needs that we would want to get to that we can't get to at this time.
As far as maintenance of the current system, does the money that you envision that we'll likely have, will the roads be of the same quality, the current road system, or will that diminish?
I think if we were comparing where we're at today and where we expect to be in 2040 under the assumptions in the proposed plan, that there might be a slight decrease in the quality of the roads. But what we feel is that because of the level of investment that we're proposing in the plan, that we would still have a good road system to be on. There's always going to be more that we'd want to do, I guess is the point on that as well. But we can't say for certainty that we're going to have just as good and certainly not better roads in the future based on the current revenue streams.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you all very much for showing up and listening.